Shalom, I'm Moreh Matan, and welcome to this week's Moreh Minute. This week we have a double portion in the Torah portions of Matot and Massei. So as we dive in here, it talks about the journeys, plural, of coming out of Egypt. Why is the word plural here in the Torah? Well, there were 42 different encampments on the way from Egypt to the Promised Land. Places where they stopped and camped, and then when the Lord told them to pick up stakes and move on. Sometimes we look at the long journey of our lives, our mission, our calling, the timeline of our lives, and we look at it as one long journey, but really it could be broken down into small milestones. I've told you before that I love the analogy of American football of not thinking about making a touchdown, but rather thinking that I have 4 downs to get 10 yards and therefore get a new first down. That's how I like to look at life. Of course we have our long-range goals, things that are way out there in the future, but sometimes it's good to look at the small goals. I also teach in my Kosher Pastor series about my brother Josh and how he was a runner, an avid runner, and even competed in races before he had kind of a career-ending injury in a basketball game in high school. When he was a runner, he told me that the hardest place to run was on the beach, because when you started, you can see the finish line. The beach is flat, and where we live in Florida, the beach is so straight that you can see the finish line at the starting line. And he told me that that can be discouraging. It feels like it's never going to get here. He thinks it's much easier to run cross country, where there's some bends in the path, where you can't really see what's coming up way in the distance. You just have to get around this bend, around this hill. You have to take the journey in small increments. And that's what the children of Israel did. And that's what we do in life. Our lives are like the little encampments that Israel did on the way to the Promised Land. Now, for some of us, if we look at this in a negative light, we can see some of these milestones or maybe pauses as distractions. We might even see them as detours in our lives. We might say to ourselves, well, I had in mind this particular path, but sometimes God has a different idea in mind. And we might look at that as a distraction, as a detour, as a variance from the course that we had set out for ourselves. But we have to remember that Hashem knows what He's doing. And that's what we can learn from these journeys from Egypt to the Promised Land. I really enjoyed studying this week the commentary from Rabbi Zalman of Liadi that said it like this. The meaning of the word Egypt in the Hebrew language, that word is Mitzrayim, the meaning of that word is borders, something that is hemming us in, something that is maybe even like a tightness, something that's maybe a bit claustrophobic. But what the Lord wants us to do is to go to a place, as my local rabbi says, of wide open spaces. A place with no borders, a place with no obstacles, a place that is not claustrophobic. He mentions when it says this is the journeys of them coming out of Egypt, he very wisely points out, well, wait a minute, wasn't the journey out of Egypt just from Egypt to Sukkot, this first place where they made the camp? But no, what he says is the journey out of Egypt is a perpetual journey. We are constantly coming out of Egypt and into wide open spaces. And again, my local rabbi here would tell us that the idea of salvation to the Jewish mind is just that it's a freedom, that it's a wide open space, that it's the opposite of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. You, my brothers and sisters, and I are constantly coming out of Egypt. Let us not allow ourselves to be hemmed in, to be in a place of tightness. Let us not allow this world and its trappings to trap us. Let us move forward into the wide open spaces that the Lord has for us. I pray that this message has been a blessing for you today, and I pray all of God's blessings and peace upon you. If you'd like to learn in a deeper way with me, you can join my program called Kosher Pastor. Go to kosherpastor.com and you can sign up. My program is an introduction to the larger yeshiva known as Yeshivat Shuvu, and you can go to shuvu.tv in order to learn more about that. Thank you for joining me today. I am Moreh Matan. Shalom and Kol Tuv.